Hi, I'm Caden, here with my brother,
Cal,
and you're watching Eating W's.
eat the W.
That's a W. Let's eat one. Let's eat one. That's a W.
On today's episode of Eating W's, we have our first official mock draft episode. We are in true mock draft season now. Most of the pro days are over. There's still some left, but the combine's over. A good chunk of the pro days are over. Free agency is slowly getting towards the tail end of everything. So now it truly just becomes what is going to happen in about 2 months here, or about a month
About
here,
a month.
right? About a
Yeah.
month here. It is
April
right around the corner.
27th.
Yep, that sounds right. It'll be here in absolutely no time. And we're, just like everybody else is, going to kind of share our thoughts on it and give our speculation on who's going to fall where. We're not going to talk about any of the free agency signings really, because any of the massive ones you've probably already seen, and any of the smaller ones, or some of the massive ones as well, we'll probably mention just throughout this episode when talking about the teams and their needs. So no real use in starting with it. But just a few things to note that did change with the owners meeting that just happened recently. I think yesterday and today, maybe even, is two huge changes. No more hip drop tackling, which that's kind of just pulling them down and dropping your hips. They were afraid of landing on legs and tearing ACLs, so they cut out that tackle. And huge changes to how kickoffs are going to be done. Kind of hard to explain, so certainly just go look that up. Go look up some diagrams, it'll kind of show it. But if you've watched any XFL games, it's going to be done almost exactly how those XFL kickoffs are done. So now we will move straight on into our mock draft. In this one, Callan will be taking all odd picks and I will be taking all even picks. So I will give Callan the honors of starting off with none other than the Chicago Bears and the number one overall pick.
And with the number one pick, I got the Bears taking, well, let's start back here and say that this was happening about 2 weeks ago. I really want to take Marvin Harrison Jr. here. I think he's the best player overall. I think he's going to be a generational talent at wide receiver, and he's going to take the league by storm. But with the Bears trading Justin Fields, I don't think they're going to go with that guy that they got out of Samford or whatever, Tyson Bagent.
Oh, yes.
But so I got the Bears taking Caleb Williams, the quarterback out of USC. And he is supposed to be another generational talent. I don't buy it 100%. I think he's a little bit Hollywood, being from USC. I don't know about all that. It's not going to necessarily transfer well in the NFL, at least not right away. He's, got to earn that kind of superstardom. I think in the NFL, he can't just come in and take it, or he has to come in and take it. He can't just come in and have it. But I think that he's going to be the number one overall pick here, and we're going to see how he does for the Bears.
Yeah, he definitely makes me a little nervous. I think he's going to be a fine player because, he has all the skills. Of course, he's not one of the most highly touted quarterbacks in a while, just for no reason. But I don't think he's going to be quite live up to the hype just because sheerly the hype is just so damn high. He kind of had a rough season last year in USC, which he didn't have the talent and their defense was allowing 40 points a game. So of course you have a rough year when that kind of thing happens, but still, if you have a true, generational first overall pick like this, you kind of like to see him carry a team more, even when it is really bad around him, because it's something he might have to do in the NFL. But he's going into one of the better situations in a while in Chicago right now. So it'll be interesting to see how he does. Moving on to the second overall pick, I have the Washington Commanders, and it is so blatantly obvious they're taking a quarterback. They let Jacoby Brissett go. They trade away Sam Howell. I can't even think of who their starting quarterback is right now. I don't know if they have one on the roster.
Marcus Mariota.
Oh, they do. So they have a backup on the roster. Tried and true all the way through, a backup in Marcus Mariota. So the real question here becomes, who is your guy? Jaden Daniels, Drake Mays. Probably not JJ McCarthy. That's definitely a reach in my eyes, and I think even in the McCarthy lovers, that's kind of a reach, putting him all the way up here at 2. But right now, with the talent they have and the lack of quarterback they have, they cannot take a guy who's not ready to start week 1. And I think if you look at Drake May, he has a really high ceiling, But just kind of with that offense they run there in UNC and some of his other things, he has a rocket arm, but he still has a lot to learn about the game itself. He's one of the more raw prospects, playing time wise. I think he's only has 1 year as a starter, if I'm not mistaken, coming behind Sam Howell after he got drafted from UNC. So I think they go with the more NFL ready, the more week one ready guy here in Jaden Daniels. I personally don't love Jaden Daniels. I like Drake Mays more because he's got that higher ceiling. But I think Jaden Daniels does have a very high ceiling of his own, and mainly because, like I said, they need a week one guy, and he is more week one.
Yeah, I'm a little bit surprised by this pick. It seemed like they were going to go Drake May, after you were talking so much about May, and then to switch it up and go Jaden Daniels.
Gotta keep them on their toes.
But a lot of mock drafts I've seen either May or Daniels here at the second overall pick, and I'm not surprised, or I am a little surprised that it's Daniels, just because I think Drake May, though I'm not the biggest fan of his, I think he has a better situation around him, would be a better situation for him in Washington, compared to Jaden Daniels. And although when I do think about it, Marcus Mariota's play is similar to more Jaden Daniels than Drake May. So I do see that connection there, now that I think about it. But either way, it's not surprising that they go quarterback.
Yep.
And on to the third overall pick for the New England Patriots, I have them taking Drake May, who I think, like you said, maybe is the more raw prospect and maybe not NFL ready. Well, they still have Bailey Zappi on the roster, who becomes the veteran guy in the Patriots locker room, or at least in the quarterback room, for the new head coach, Jared Mayo. And I think that they are able to at least wait and see what they got with Drake May, and they can at least make him the backup and, kind of learn from Bailey Zappi. Not that that's like learning from Aaron Rodgers or anything like that.
Yeah.
But at least that draft and develop kind of style, would be better suited for Drake May. I think he gets in the right situation for New England here.
Yeah, it would actually be good to learn from Bailey Zappi, learn control a little bit, because that's one of Drake May's thing, is he has a rocket for an arm. He's a pretty mobile guy for when you think of a more pocket passer like Drake May. But that's kind of his thing, is just reading these defenses, knowing when to throw it, knowing how to protect the ball. And that's kind of where Bailey Zappi makes his money. It's what he's able to do really well. Can't rocket arm it, doesn't really have the most overall accuracy and arm talent, but he's just smart with the ball. He doesn't make silly mistakes often. So it is good for him to learn from a guy like Bailey Zappi. But jumping into that situation in New England right now, it's just not very hot on offense. There's not really much substance there to kind of lean on as a rookie. So I like it for the Patriots, but I don't like it for Drake May. I kind of feel bad for him in this situation. Moving on to the fourth overall pick. This has pretty much been written off as a trade area at this point. Someone's jumping up and getting a quarterback in almost every mock draft you look at. It's usually the Vikings. It's usually J.J. McCarthy. I don't hate it, don't love it. I think there's definitely pros. I think there's a lot more cons to that situation. But in this one, in my head, it's smartest for the Cardinals to just sit and get a receiver, and you take the best receiver in this draft, one of the best receiver prospects in a long time, Marvin Harrison Jr. I mean, you lose Rondell Moore in a trade over the offseason, and you bring in Desmond Ridder as a backup quarterback to back up Kyler Murray in case of injuries. You got to give him some guys to throw to. You got to give Kyler some more guys to throw to. So you go and get a true generational talent in Marvin Harrison Jr. here instead of taking a trade and getting that other draft capital.
Yeah, I like the pick here for the Cardinals. It's similar to when they drafted Larry Fitzgerald, I feel like, when they just took the best player available, and it happened to be the best player overall in the draft. But like I said earlier, I think that Marvin Harrison is going to be one of the best players in this draft. And I think he falls to a great situation in Arizona for Kyler Murray, where he automatically becomes a number one wide receiver, where he gets paired with a nice tight end in Trey McBride, who's really showed up last year and showed that he's going to be one of the top tight end targets in the NFL. And I think that for Marvin Harrison Jr., I think that he's going to excel as a number one wide receiver here for Arizona. He's crisp at route running. He has great deep speed. He's really just an all-around wide receiver in the same form of Larry Fitzgerald. So I just look for him to have a similar career trajectory.
Yeah, he's a beast, he is.
And on to the 5th overall pick, I'm going to attempt a trade here where I think the Vikings are going to attempt to jump up here. And this is where I think that they will use those 2 picks that they got or the pick they got from Houston, which is now the 23rd pick?
Yes, correct. The 23rd pick. And they hit next, and you gotta select them both. So go up and select the Chargers now. We're still learning the system a little bit. The mock draft we're using, if you're curious, is Pro Football Network mock draft. It's one of my favorite ones that has trades for free, so I do like that.
I think it's going to cost them all 3 first-round picks.
You do?
Yep.
Interesting.
I think it's going to cost them next year's and the 2 for this year for the number 5. And we're going to propose this trade.
Let's see what it thinks. It kind of like judges
the trade
your trades.
Has been accepted.
And it has accepted.
So it'll take at least 3 first-round picks, the 11th, the 23rd, and the 2025 first-round pick for the Minnesota Vikings for them to move up to the 5 spot. And I believe that they are going to take a quarterback here because I don't know how well they really believe in Sam Darnold. They only signed him to a 1-year contract. And from what I've heard, they really are liking this guy, and it is J.J. McCarthy out of Michigan, the national championship winner, comes to the Vikings on really a solid offense. Who there is a lack of a running game, but you got 2 number 1 wide receivers in Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson, and for that alone is able to, carry an offense no matter who the quarterback is. When you saw that Nick Mullins was throwing for 300 yards, 300 plus yards a game last year. So just any quarterback with any amount of talent should be able to connect with those wide receivers. And one good thing here is that he can draft and develop, or the Vikings can draft and develop here with J.J. McCarthy sitting behind Sam Darnold, at least to start. See how Sam Darnold really does. They say his best football is ahead of him, does Sam Darnold, or actually Kevin O'Connell said that today on the Pat McAfee show, that Sam Darnold's best football is ahead of him. So we'll see how really much of that is true. And at least they'll have this draft and develop quarterback that's sitting behind them waiting in the wing.
Yeah, as the head coach, you always gotta talk up your guy, but I'm not gonna lie, I kind of do like Sam Darnold. I think that he has a lot of intangibles that people overlook just because he's had rough times in the past, but those rough times in the past, 99% of the times have come from bad situations. I mean, this guy's been in the league 5 years, and I want to say he's had like 4 different head coaches and 5, if not like, I think he might have had 6 offensive coordinators, if that's even possible, 6 in 5 years, but I think he has. I really do. So it's just been terrible situations for Sam Darnold everywhere. That's mostly my con about the Vikings moving up is I just don't think we need to, and we would have to give up a lot of draft capital to do it. There's definitely some things about J.J. McCarthy I don't love. One thing I do really like about if this does happen is I think J.J. McCarthy ran the most pro-style offense, so his skills will translate week 1 best. He's probably got one of the lower ceilings maybe out of all the quarterbacks, or at least out of the top 6 quarterbacks ceiling wise. But I think that he's going to be really solid from the get-go. And with an offense like we have right now, you said a weak run game or a weaker run game or something. I kind of disagree. You got guys like Aaron Jones coming in. He's a little older, but he's still doing really well. The emergence of Ty Chandler towards the end of last season. But yeah, I'm torn on this pick, but less torn and I don't know which way to go, and more torn and I'm actually fine with either way, to be completely honest. We move up and we get a guy like J.J. McCarthy, or if we really give up some capital, maybe even go up and get a guy like Drake May, I'm fine with that. You're getting your QB for the future. If we sit and kind of hoard that capital and maybe even trade back a little bit for one of the later round guys, or just take a JJ McCarthy or whoever could possibly fall to us at 11 and not have to give up any capital and still get a QB for the future. I don't know. I'm actually really happy any way the Vikings go. I think that it is a win-win for us across the board. I really do.
Yeah, like I said, I think like you said, he's maybe the most pro ready, so he probably has the highest floor, but maybe the lowest ceiling, which is very interesting for a prospect.
Yeah, it's something that you don't really see that often. Okay, so that comes to me at number 6. I have my little notes here, if you're wondering what I keep looking at. But so now I was going to go JJ McCarthy at 6. I really didn't think Callan was going to have anybody jump up and grab him. I thought he might have the Chargers stay. So now I'm sitting here looking, and the Giants, like I said, I was going to go JJ McCarthy. I think there's a good chance they get a guy for the future after Daniel Jones, or to kind of pressure Daniel Jones and light that fire under his ass. But now I'm sitting here, and they just had their guy yoinked out in front of them. They also need a receiver, and there's a lot of really good receivers. I'm just kind of looking, maybe somebody jumps up and gives some really good value to the Giants to get ahead of the Titans and take a tackle like Joe Alt. I'm just kind of looking down the list here and
That could be.
seeing who that might be, who else needs a real left tackle. The Steelers kind of need a pure left tackle, but that is quite a jump from them to go from 20 all the way to 6. So just looking at it, maybe the Saints, I mean, they take Trevor Penning last year and he hasn't really worked out, but maybe they move him into guard and get a true left tackle. I don't know. There's a lot of things that could happen here. I think it's, I can't decide. I think it's probably more likely the Giants just sit here and get a wide receiver, but I'm just going to kind of see what the mock draft tells us in a trade between the Giants and the Saints, just kind of what they think it would take for the Saints to move up and get a tackle here, maybe jump in front of the Titans and steal a guy like Joe Alt. Maybe if I can find these.
Next to the Saints.
I'm looking for the Saints. That would help also. I don't know why. So they'd have to give up 14, of course, and hell, they really might have to give up like a first round next year.
Probably.
To move up that many spots this early in the draft.
A first next year, and I would say a fourth.
Yeah, maybe we'll just throw in like a later pick here. See what it tells us here. Trade has been rejected. Interesting.
Need more than a fourth.
You think, gosh, do they really want that much for him? Do they think that's how much they need?
Well, to move up to 6, you're taking one of the top prospects in the draft.
I'm just gonna throw in this and see what it says. If it gets rejected again, we'll just go. Okay, it got accepted this time.
Took the first and second round pick.
Just because that's giving up a lot for the Saints, I don't know if they'll do it because there's a lot of other places they need to. But just for kind of some fun and for kind of some food for thought here, I'm gonna have the Saints jump in front of the Titans so they can get one of the better left tackle prospects in a while in Joe Alt.
Wow, that's quite the pick there, and really that's a lot to give up to move up. But like I just said, you're getting one of the more generational talents in this game, and you're getting one of the top left tackles in the NFL draft this year, and he's been looked at as one of the top tackles since last year. And he comes from Notre Dame, where he comes from a pro-style offense. So, again, he'll be NFL ready. And I think he'll step in and be a cornerstone for that Saints offensive line week 1.
Yeah. It's a little silly with them having taken Trevor Penning in the first round not too long ago. But I think Trevor Penning's just a guy with one of those good, nasty, mean streaks that you could move inside to a guard and maybe have him there as a swing tackle in case of injuries on either side to Ramczyk or rookie Joe Alt. So I just really like this pick. It is a lot to give up, which is the main reason I don't think it's overly realistic, but I think it would be a hell of a pickup for the Saints. I really do.
And I just read earlier today that Ryan Ramczyk may not make the roster because of injury concerns.
Mm-hmm. So that would make even more sense because you're going to have a good tackle somewhere at that point. Yeah.
So moving on to the 7th overall pick, the Tennessee Titans. I got them still taking an offensive tackle here, where I think that they probably would have taken Joe Alt had he been here. And if the Giants were to stay and take a quarterback or something like that happens. But I got them taking Olu Fashanu, the Penn State offensive tackle. And he probably would have been one of the top offensive tackles if he had entered the draft last year. but he came back for his senior season, and he had one hell of a senior season. He didn't have the greatest tape against Ohio State, and he did kind of falter against some of the top tier defenses, but I think that can be fixed with good coaching, and he'll get good coaching there in Tennessee, where he will immediately become one of the top offensive tackles or left tackles for the Tennessee Titans, to team him up with who they got.
Andre Dillard. Is that who they have on the right side?
I think so. I think they signed Andre Dillard. So they'll have them on the right side, and then team him up with Fashanu on the left side, who's probably the best pass protector in this NFL draft this year. And I think that he's a good fit for this Tennessee Titans offense, and he'll help protect Will Levis's blind side.
You just touched on it, something I was going to mention. One of the better pass protectors, just true pass protectors. He's a super athletic guy. Usually when you think Titans, you think Derrick Henry, you think big meanies up front, you think big maulers who are going to be great in the run game. But now they bring in a guy like Brian Callahan, and they're going to assumably have a much more pass-heavy offense. They get a guy like Tony Pollard, who's a great running back out of the backfield, but not really a pure running back. So now there's this huge transition going from these run-oriented, big, strong maulers up front to now they probably want some more guys that are faster, more athletic, more better in the pass protection game. So they start the pass protection era off right with a guy like Olu Fashanu. And then now we drop here. You've seen it, all offense. It actually doesn't happen very often anymore. Usually you see some defense in there. But so far in the top 7 picks, we've had all offense. That changes here with the Falcons. Every year you think the Falcons are probably going to take an edge rusher or some sort of defensive player, and they almost never do. But they finally just do it here. They take the top edge rusher. Who is the top edge rusher? That is almost completely up to your opinion. There's two or three guys who can easily be called the top pass rusher in this draft class. But my top pass rusher is Dallas Turner out of Alabama. He's just the most balanced guy coming out of Alabama. Saban's gone now, but he was with Saban his entire time in Alabama. You just learn things from Saban in a program like that you don't get at other programs. You don't get out of other talents. And he's just the most balanced, best all-around edge rusher, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think he's one of the best edge rushers in this draft. He'll follow in the footsteps of Will Anderson Jr., and he'll be well on track to possibly duplicate an Alabama player being the defensive rookie of the year.
Be interesting.
And on to the 9th overall pick, the Chicago Bears, who really have built quite an offense here for Caleb Williams with I can't think of who their running back is. They just signed him. DeAndre Swift. Yes. They got DeAndre Swift, who had a career year in Philly and is going to look to lead that backfield in Chicago. And they got DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and now they got the home run threat and Malik Neighbors, the big, deep downfield, big body wide receiver who can really score a touchdown from anywhere on the field. He's similar built to Jamar Chase, again, a wide receiver at LSU. What do you know? Another wide receiver from LSU. But I think that had he not been in the same class with Marvin Harrison Jr., he's possibly the number 1 overall wide receiver and number 1 overall prospect, just because of not only that lineage of LSU wide receivers, but just his senior or his season this year. I can't remember if he was a senior or not, but this season he had one of his career years and really showed that he can be NFL ready and adds more firepower to that Chicago Bears offense.
Yeah, I like that. I personally have Rome Odunze myself ranked over him. I think that they're very equal. I think you're winning either way you go. But yeah, going with an LSU receiver just seems to be like a gold mine these days. I mean, you got Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase. Before then, you had OBJ and Jarvis Landry together. This year, you have Malik Neighbors, and later in the draft, probably even first round, if not early second round, you're going to see Brian Thomas Jr. out of LSU. It's just, I don't know what they put in the water at LSU or in Louisiana, but it builds receivers. That's what it does, because it's just crazy to see. But I do like that pick. I think, like I said, they win with no matter what receiver they go with for their new talent at quarterback. Moving on to the Jets at 10, we'll start speeding things up a little bit now that we're getting towards the outside of the top 10. But here, I kind of want to go Brock Bowers. They're clearly all in on Rodgers right now. They built out the offensive line with veterans this offseason to protect Aaron Rodgers. So why not get him a young target? I think their number one tight end right now, if I'm not mistaken, is Tyler Conklin, who, of course, is a former Viking. I really like Tyler Conklin, but I don't think he's a long-term number one tight end. So I could easily see them going Brock Bowers here. I think it'd be really easy for them to go and really good for them to go with Brock Bowers. But I am going to hold off on that for now just because it's a little early. It's a little bit of a reach. And since they got all that veteran presence on the offensive line, I think they're going to probably want to go grab somebody who's a little bit younger on that offensive line. They kind of are struggling at tackle right now. If I'm not mistaken, it's Morgan Moses, who is...
And Tyron Smith.
Correct. So Tyron Smith on the left, Morgan Moses on the right, who is very old, definitely past his prime. So you go out and grab a guy like Talise Funga out of Oregon State, one of the higher ranked tackles. He's more of a pure right tackle, but he can move into guard if need be, which makes even more sense for their offensive line since they really need some help and have a lot of veteran presence there. Get a young guy that you can coach up like Talise Funga.
Yeah, I think that Brock Bowers is really in play here.
I do too.
He is
it.
a home run hitter. He is he's probably the top tight end in this draft. And even though he doesn't have the biggest size of the tight ends in the NFL, he's still one of the more crisp route runners. I really am surprised that the Jets don't go Brock Bowers here just because they would add another weapon for Aaron Rodgers and do what the Packers never did and add first round talent for Aaron Rodgers. Although I think it would just be too little too late. I think that going offensive line is the more smart move, maybe not the more sexy move. But either way, I think it's a solid pick for the Jets.
Doesn't matter what Rodgers does if he just gets hurt 5 snaps in again. So you gotta get somebody to protect him.
And moving on to the Chargers, who get their first selection here after trading back with the Vikings. And at number 11, I have them taking wide receiver Rome Odunze out of Washington. And they just lost Mike Williams and Keenan Allen and only have Quentin Johnson and your Tennessee wide receiver,
Josh
Palmer, who is a very solid player, but not a number one. And Romo Odunze can come in and be a number one wide receiver. And again, probably would be the number one overall wide receiver had he not been in the same draft class with Marvin Harrison. But I digress on Marvin Harrison. Rome Odunze had one of the top seasons, one of the top statistical seasons in college last year for Washington, who had a dream season all the way to the national championship. And really, he was the leader of that offense, and he can prove to be the leader of that offense in LA too, by being that number one guy. And I think that that's good for the Chargers to get that number one guy.
Yeah, the last regime in Los Angeles clearly had a type, to say the least. I mean, Keenan Allen came in from the regime even before them. They go and they draft Mike Williams. They draft Josh Palmer. They draft Quentin Johnson. 3 pretty much identical wide receiver. 3 big body, ball hawks, deep threats. So now, new regime, you finally get some new blood in there. I think Rome Odunze pairs so well with 2 other big bodied wide receivers, like I just mentioned, and Quentin Johnson and Josh Palmer. You kind of get more of that home run threat, a little more of a true route runner, pure receiver. This is a really good pick, and they were able to move back, gain a lot of draft capital, getting 2 first rounds this year plus 1 next year, and still get one of the best receivers on the board. That's a hell of a draft for the Chargers and Jim Harbaugh in his first year. So now moving on to another even, we have 12 here with the Denver Broncos. You think quarterback, of course. Again, off the top of my head, can't even think who a quarterback is on their roster. Maybe Jared Stidham.
On their roster.
On their roster right now, I think it's Jared Stidham.
Yeah.
You probably see a move back here in complete honesty. I mean, there's just no real reason for them to stick and pick here with all the quarterbacks gone. You can probably get Bo Nix later in the first if you move back there. But to be honest, I just don't think anybody's really jumping at the bit to move up here. I mean, you're not really jumping anybody. There's no one that you're really going up for right now. So I don't think that they can find enough value to move back here. I think it makes sense for them to move back, but it only makes sense if you get the right value.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they stay here. And actually, just looking at their depth chart, my personal opinion on the next biggest need for them is probably a corner going to the defensive side of the ball. So again, just like the receivers or just like the edge rushers and receivers kind of, who your top corner is a total toss up, but showing that Saban bias, again, my top corner is the Alabama guy. I'm actually going to have them stick and pick, and I'm going to have them go Teron Arnold to go across from another Alabama corner in Pat Surtain. And I don't think they ever played together, maybe a little bit like freshman and senior year, but kind of reunite those Alabama corners and get another true bookend guy to go on the other side of Pat Surtain and just be a lockdown secondary.
Yeah, that's a big pickup for them because they just lost Justin Simmons, who, even though is a safety, that's just is somebody in that defensive backfield, and that is some Teron Arnold can come in and take the place of Justin Simmons, not necessarily in that safety role, but in that nickel corner, slot corner role, where Teron Arnold can play the outside or the inside. So he is one of the top corners in this draft. Again, it just depends on your defensive system, who kind of fits better. Quinyon Mitchell has been seen as a top corner, but he's more of a zone corner. So Teron Arnold, I think he's more man-to-man, coming from Alabama, where you're going against SEC wide receivers, which are pretty much NFL wide receivers, especially when you're playing LSU at least
literally
once or twice a season. So it's big for those corners to get that experience, and I think that Teron Arnold kind of gets the jump here with that Alabama experience compared to Quinyon Mitchell, who came from the smaller school of Toledo. So I think it's a solid pickup for the Broncos, who try to get back that old no-fly zone defense of the early 2010s.
That's what got them to the Super Bowl.
Yep. And on to the 13th overall pick, I got the Las Vegas Raiders. And I'm not really sure what, they're going to do. I know they really like Aiden O'Connell. They need somebody to kind of help protect him. They really need a running back right now, now that Josh Jacobs is gone. But there's not really a top running back like Bijan Robinson or Jahmyr Gibbs last season. So I got them taking the smart pick and going with the offensive tackle Amarius Mims out of Georgia, who is probably the more raw prospect out of it, but he probably has the higher ceiling, I believe. Even though he does have injury issues, he even had injury issues at the combine. This is, I feel like, more of a Raiders pick because of not only the high ceiling, but just the raw ability. They really like those guys who can come in and not necessarily have to play right away, and they can draft and develop and let him learn the offensive system and learn that offensive line and not have to play right away.
That is so funny that you just did that, because I'll echo everything he just said. The Raiders love to just take athletic monsters, or just overall gifted, we'll just call it, whether it's through athleticism. I mean, you see them do it. The meme started where they just took the fastest 40 every year. They love to take those athletic guys.
Oh, and I should have them take Xavier Worthy.
They love to just take these guys like Amarius Mims, who are giant human beings. Like, you can't coach size. You really can't. And this guy is just huge. He's pretty damn quick for his size. He had an awesome, I think he was the guy who ran an insane 40. I can't remember what it was, but for his size, it was just mind blowing that he ran the 40 that he did. So yeah, this just makes so much sense for the Raiders. Who knows who your quarterback of the future is going to be, but there's not really any point in taking him here. Still in that no man's land, just like the Broncos were, where there's not a ton of value in moving back. So just go ahead and get a tackle of the future. I like it. So now moving on to the New York Giants. Originally they were 6. Now they moved back here to 14 where the Saints were. And now I think they still go receiver. Who they decide they want to go at receiver is one thing. I mean, there's a lot of different options you got here. Brian Thomas Jr. is probably the obvious one. In fact, Brian Thomas Jr. is the one I'm going to go with just because gotta love those LSU receivers. Not much more of a reason than that. He had a really good combine, really shot up draft boards recently, and sometimes that's a little bit of a smoke screen, but a lot of the time they shoot up draft boards for a reason. But if they want to get more of a jump ball guy, just a go out there and win it, you go with a guy like Keon Coleman, who I think a lot of people are underrated on, but could slip into the first round. Both Adonai Mitchell and Xavier Worthy out of Texas could both easily make their way into the first round. Two really talented receivers there. But right now for here, I just have him going Brian Thomas Jr. because he's probably the best ranked receiver at this point overall.
Yeah, they definitely think they need a wide receiver to go with. They have Isaiah Hodgins and Isaiah McKenzie, who are both solid wide receivers, but they don't really have that number one guy. And I think Brian Thomas Jr. can come in and be that number one guy. They drafted Jalen Hyatt last year, but he's more of that downfield speedster guy, more of a gadget player. Brian Thomas Jr. can be more your number one possession wide receiver, and I think he'll fit in that Giants offense very well. And on to the 15th overall pick, I got the Indianapolis Colts. And now that most of the wide receivers are gone, they luckily were able to re-sign Michael Pittman because they have a need at wide receiver, but they also have a need at corner. And I have them taking their top corner on their draft board, and that's Quinyon Mitchell, the cornerback out of Toledo, who I previously talked about a little bit, but he's kind of the more zone click and click down click down corner, zone specialty type of guy. He came out of Toledo where he was the best player on that defensive field for that school, and he even played a little bit of offense. So I don't think he'll get in the offense in the Indianapolis Colts, but just showing that athleticism is there for the Colts corner, and I think he'll fit in next to Kenny Moore very well.
Interesting. I did not see that one coming. That is really not what I expected at all. So that threw me off because to be dead honest, I was probably going to take Quinyon Mitchell right here to the Seahawks. One option that the Seahawks could very easily go to right here is going with an inside offensive lineman. What's that center? Jackson Powers Johnson, the center out of Oregon. He's a guy who could easily be a center, easily move to either guard, and the Seahawks just kind of need everything inside offensive line. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if this is their pick here. It's a smart pick for them. But after last year, I went all in on Osiris Torrance. I thought that guy, the guard out of Florida from last year's draft, I thought he was going to be a mid to almost early, probably not early, but definitely a mid, if not at the very least a late first round pick. And he fell to way far down, and the Bills ended up snagging him in late second or early third round. He fell way down the board. So I just don't trust putting an inside lineman in this first round. The only team that you ever really see do it are the Lions, and it does work for them. I mean, they got one of the best centers in the league, Frank Ragnow, out of it. But I'm just going to hold off for now, and that's really the only real reason on that. So now it just kind of becomes, what do they want? There's a lot of different options here. It is not a need for them, to say the least, but when you're sitting here at 16 and a weapon like Brock Bowers is still on the board and an offense like the Seahawks where they use so much tight end, you see 3 tight end from the Seahawks constantly. They do have a lot of weapons and a really good slot guy in Jackson Smith-Njigba, who they picked up last year. But you're just going best player available. You can't believe this guy fell to you. You snagged Brock Bowers.
Oh, man. Adding more firepower to that Seattle Seahawks offense, who teams them up with Jackson Smith-Njigba, DK Metcalf, and Tyler Lockett. Now, whoever's playing quarterback for the Seahawks, whether that's Sam Howell or Geno Smith, Sam Howell, who could be their quarterback of the future, dark horse right there, because Geno Smith is on the last year of his contract. it was only a 2-year extension, I'm pretty sure, last year. But he's either way. Geno Smith is getting up there in age too. He was a late bloomer, so that's a big weapon for the Seattle Seahawks offense. And I think that no matter who's at quarterback, you have to be able to perform well for the Seattle Seahawks now that you have all these weapons, a very solid running game. That's just a shocker pick, but very, 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 very surprising. Very surprising for the Seahawks to go tight end there when they have Noah Fant, who they just re-signed. But like you said, they do a lot of multiple tight end sets.
They run a lot.
And I think that Brock Bowers is going to be a superstar in that Seattle Seahawks offense.
Yeah, and I mean, you sit there and play with who do you want in the slot? Jackson Smith-Njigba, Brock Bowers, both. You can hit out defenses with so many formations, so much talent there on that offense. Maybe not the smartest. Maybe you go a little smarter with another need somewhere else. But you have some fun with Brock Bowers if he's still there at 16.
Definitely. And then moving on to the 17th overall pick is the Jacksonville Jaguars, who just picked up Gabe Davis in the offseason to replace the production of Calvin Ridley. They still have who they signed in the offseason, Christian Kirk, who gets paid like a number one wide receiver. They have a need at corner and wide receiver. The top two corners are gone. But there is one corner left that's still from Alabama, and that's Kool-Aid McKinstry, who I think will line up opposite of Tyson Campbell and be a very solid pickup for the Jacksonville Jaguars. We talked about that lineage of Alabama cornerbacks and playing under Nick Saban and being, having that experience of a jump playing against NFL talent. And the same can be said for Kool-Aid McKinstry, who's not the most athletic cornerback, but he's definitely very solid and can play man-to-man or zone, and was able to play both at Alabama and will fit into this Jacksonville Jaguars defense very well.
That is interesting. According to kind of rankings, that's quite a reach, him jumping over Nate Wiggins and Cooper DeJean. Of course, Cooper DeJean's not a true outside corner like Kool-Aid McKinstry and Nate Wiggins are. Mm-hmm. But I actually really like it. I think that we see a huge fall from Nate Wiggins, mostly because of the ban of the hip drop tackle. And Nate Wiggins is a small little guy. I want to say he came into the combine like 170. Even at his pro day, he was only about 180. So you get those bigger running backs coming to the outside against him, and he goes against those bigger receivers. He's just going to get bullied. He's not going to be able to tackle them overly well. So I think that we see a fall, and Nate Wiggins falls his way into the second round, which leads to a guy like Kool-Aid McKinstry jumping up a little bit on the draft board. So I do like that pick. Mm-hmm. So now moving on to the Bengals at 18. All the LSU wide receivers are gone, so no reason for them to go wide receiver, even with the departure of T. Higgins. I think they need to give Joe Burrow some protection. I think that a guy like Jamar Chase can almost single-handedly carry a wide receiver room. He is truly just that good, kind of on that Justin Jefferson, Devontae Adams level. So I do think that they hold off on receiver. There is so many good receivers in this class. You could easily grab a first-round talent early into late second round, maybe even to the third round. It is a crazy good wide receiver class.
Very deep.
So you get one of the better tackles while they're still there. You get Troy Fautanu out of Washington. If you want, you can keep him at his left tackle position that he played mostly in college. He played some guard in college too, so you could easily move him inside to more of that guard position. Just a good do-it-all guy to add to a struggling offensive line.
Yeah, and I think that he'll be able to sit behind. Who do they have? They have Orlando Brown Jr. and Trent Brown. Yep. So I knew they had two Browns at their offensive tackles, so they got two big Browns to sit behind for Troy Fautanu, who can be that swing tackle if either one gets hurt. And I think that he'll eventually take over at either left or right tackle, whichever one kind of loses his position first. And whoever that is, I think Fautanu will step in and be able to replace right away and eventually take over a starting spot. And moving on to the 19th overall pick, I got the LA Rams. And with the LA Rams, they need defensive help and they need an edge rusher. And they take the top one available, and that's Latu, who was probably the top edge rusher in college last year when you look at statistics. But even though Dallas Turner, who kind of, again, has a higher ceiling because he comes from Alabama, I think that Latu has the highest floor. Like I said earlier about J.J. McCarthy, highest floor, lowest ceiling. He definitely has all the intangibles to come in and be an edge rusher right away on day one. And he was able to prove that by leading UCLA in sacks last year for the whole season. And I think he'll come in and make an instant impact on this LA Rams defense.
Yeah, this guy just is so technical. He is like a robot in a good way with his pass rush moves because he is just so precise with them, so consistent with them. He can just do pass rush moves all day and hit you with different ones all day. Interesting to see him jump over Jared Verse there because I think a lot of people have Jared Verse higher than him. But Jared Verse almost reminds me a little bit of the Texas Tech guy that the Raiders took last year. Tyree Wilson. He's kind of jumping up draft boards a little later, kind of more of an athletic freak, true edge rusher like Tyree Wilson is. And Tyree Wilson hasn't overly paid off for the Raiders. He's got a lot of time to improve, and he definitely started to look better last season. So I wouldn't be crazy surprised if we saw a little bit of a drop from Jared Verse. That moves to me now with the Steelers at 20. And right here, in my opinion, you just need a true left tackle. You got, blanking on his name now, but the right tackle they got out of Georgia last year, who has turned out really well for them. Broderick Jones, thank you. He's been playing super well so far. He's been a really solid guy. And when they took Broderick Jones, people kind of saw it as a reach, but they went and got the guy they wanted. And I think that this is going to be kind of seen as a reach a little bit right here. But all of the true left tackles are gone right now. So the most natural left tackle left on the board right now is probably Tyler Guyton out of Oklahoma. So to take him all the way up here at 20 is, like I said, probably a little bit of a reach. But sorry to kind of echo myself, but like I just said, so is Broderick Jones. If they see something they like in Tyler Guyton and he becomes their guy, go get him. And it already worked once. Let's see if it works again, and you can get bookend tackles for the next decade, depending on how you play their contracts.
Yeah, and Tyler Guyton, he's going to be a good guy for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I think that he's going to be quite the player. He'll possibly could step in day one, but maybe he'll be better suited being a draft and develop guy. He's kind of a more raw prospect, maybe not ready to step in and play right away, but I think that he'll definitely be their left tackle of the future. And moving on to the 21st overall pick, I got the Miami Dolphins, who need help along the offensive line after losing Robert Hunt this offseason. And I think that they take the top offensive guard available, who's not only one of the top offensive guards, but top swing tackles in this draft, and Graham Barton, the offensive lineman out of Duke. And I say offensive lineman because he has literally played all 5 positions in college, and he's been working out at all 5 positions for teams and during the combine and during the pro days. So the fact that he can play anywhere on this offensive line means that he's very versatile, and I think that he'll fit in, especially on the interior of the offensive line for Miami, but he could play on those offensive tackles if need be.
Just like the Vegas pick, you got me hooked exactly. I could echo every single word there. On my notes, I put my team needs for each team, and for Dolphins, I have all O-line. And for my Graham Barton notes, I literally put left tackle in college, all. For can play all the offensive line. All. Exactly. So perfect pick here. Perfect range to take him. You're by no means reaching, but you're not risking him falling to somebody else in front of you, taking him here at 21. I love that pick for the Dolphins. Now moving on to the Eagles right here. There's a couple of things they kind of they're a team that's in a weird spot right now. They don't have anything that's such like a blatant need. They have
Mm-hmm.
a lot of talent along the offensive line, even though it's getting older and they did lose Jason Kelsey. They got a lot of talent across their defense, even though they do have a few smaller holes and a few older guys. But someone they did lose this offseason is Avonte Maddox, who was their true slot corner. And I believe they lost a safety. Yes, they lost Kevin Byard to the Bears. So you're looking for a slot corner, you're looking for a safety. Get yourself a guy who can do both. I think it makes total sense for them to pick up Cooper DeJean out of Iowa right here. Because exactly like I said, he can do both. He's that true hybrid spot. Maybe once either Darius Slay or their other corner, blanking on his name, retire or move on to a different team, maybe you test him out as an outside corner and see how he does. But for now, when you have those two guys on each side, you just let him play in the middle. You let him play some safety. I really like it for the Eagles.
Yeah, that's a solid pickup. I really wanted Green Bay to pick him up. I was hoping he'd fall just a few more picks, but he is a very talented safety and slot corner. He is coming off a broken leg, so he hasn't been able to do any of the workouts at the pro day or the combine. But just from his film last year, he's shown that he's NFL ready, and he'll fit in perfectly in that Philadelphia Eagles defensive backfield. And not only does he fit in as a slot corner and safety, but he can also be your punt returner, who's a very, very, very good punt returner, is Cooper DeJean. So he could be a special team superstar as well. And moving on to the 23rd overall pick, the second first round pick for the LA Chargers. And with their first pick, I can't remember who I had them pick.
Yeah, you can scroll back up.
Oh yeah, I had them pick Rome O'Dunes because they needed a wide receiver to go with Quentin Johnson and Josh Palmer. Well, now they need a corner on the other side to pair with Asante Samuel.
I almost said J.C. Jackson, but he's gone.
Nope, J.C. Jackson is gone. And I got them taking Nate Wiggins, the cornerback out of Clemson, who can be the outside corner and a number 2 corner opposite of, who did I just say? Asante Samuel. So I think that he'll fit in very well in this Chargers defense. Asante Samuel was a very solid pickup for them, and I think that he'll mirror that pick and be a very solid pickup in that defensive backfield.
That's interesting. The only thing that I do like that pick because Nate Wiggins is a very good coverage corner. But like I said earlier, my worry is him coming up and protecting against the run, which is a similar worry about Asante Samuel. He brings a little more boom for his size, but he's still a pretty small guy. So something you need if you have 2 smaller corners is linebackers who can play off ball and can play sideline to sideline. And that's something that they very much have, being headed by Eric Kendricks there. So it does make sense for them. And I think that's a good pickup overall for them, especially considering they're kind of playing with house money with this being an extra pick from their trade down with the Vikings. So might as well take a risk on a guy. I like that. Now moving on to the Cowboys at 24. There's a lot of things that they can do here. I mean, they have a really solid roster to say the least. So they can kind of take a luxury pick, take a guy that they want to draft and develop, see what they can do in the future. I actually could very easily see them going maybe like an off-ball linebacker. Top one right now is Edrin Cooper. Maybe this Peyton Wilson out of NC State is kind of who's top in my head. I could even maybe see them taking the risk and going with the dime a dozen position and taking a running back, whoever you want to grab there. They have Blake Corum way down the list on this one, but Blake Corum is probably the number 1 guy in my head just because of the workload he was able to take on in Michigan. But really, I think they just go with the smartest thing. They have some older people on the offensive line. And J.C. Latham, the right tackle who could definitely play some guard and swing tackle out of Alabama, is still there. We talked about it a couple of times with Alabama just being a good school. So I think this is a guy that can come in, and if you need him to play day one, he could probably play day one. But he's going to be even better if you let him develop a little bit in a really good offense like the Cowboys.
Yeah, I don't really like that pick for Dallas because they have a right tackle in Trey Smith. Yeah, Trace.
I thought the right tackle was Terrence Steele.
No, is he their guard? They got a guy they drafted a guy from. It was just like Tyron Smith.
Oh, Tyler Smith.
Tyler
Tulsa.
Smith
Yep.
out of Tulsa.
You're
Yep.
right. You're right.
So that's their right tackle. And J.C. Latham is strictly a right tackle who played all right tackle during college. So I don't agree with that pick so much just because that's kind of two of the same type of right tackle. But nonetheless, we could switch one to the left tackle and possibly, keep one as a backup. But I think that J.C. Latham will be a very solid player in the NFL, whether that's for Dallas or for someone else. And moving on to the 25th overall pick, we got the Green Bay Packers, who really have lost all of their draft prospects in front of them, like Cooper DeJean, Graham Barton, J.C. Latham. Their needs are mostly on defense. In fact, they're all on defense except for offensive linemen. And I really do think that they do go offensive linemen here. It just is which one. And for the best one available, as far as tackles, you got Jordan Morgan, Kingsley Suamatia. But I think that they go for the center of the future and Jackson Powers Johnson. Now, their center right now is, I'm blanking on his name because
Josh Myers.
Josh Myers, and he has not been very good. He has been the 26th overall ranked center last year, so that's kind of the bottom of the league. And I think that he is on the last year of his contract, and I could see Jackson Powers Johnson as a center in waiting, especially as for the fact that not only is he the top interior offensive lineman available, but he's the top center available. And like you were saying earlier, maybe, that's kind of a reach. You get interior linemen or centers later in the draft, but this is a different type of center, and this is one that can come in and be the top center for the NFL and take that center ranking from 26 to top in the NFL. And I think that he will do that with the pick for the Packers here, and maybe not right away, but down a few seasons, he could be one of the top linemen in the NFL.
Centers are underrated in my head. For those of you who don't know, I played center all through high school, so I, of course, love the position of center. But, I mean, you look at a center in the first round is a reach. I'll be the first to admit it, too. But if you look at the times it has happened recently, they're all amazing top of the NFL centers. You got Frank Ragnow to the Lions in 2019. You got Tyler Lindenbaum to the Baltimore Ravens in 2022, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe 21, I can't remember for sure. But I mean, when it happens, it's worth it. They clearly make it worth it. Jackson Power Johnson is probably going to be the next guy in that line. You lose John Runyon in the offseason too, so maybe he plays guard while you wait for that Josh Myers contract to end. Just a lot of versatility and a lot of things you can do with it. So when a lot of guys are getting snagged ahead of you, like your DeJean and a couple of those corners, I do really like this pick. I don't think it's settling at all. I think it helps them out a ton. And then if I am the Tampa Bay Buccaneers right now, my number one need for them, this website's number one need for them is edge. They just lost Shaquille Barrett over the offseason. They are sprinting up to the podium right now to take Jared Verse, who is pretty similar to Shaquille Barrett, if not even a little quicker than him. And he's fallen all the way to the end of the first round here for them. Not much to say about it. You absolutely got a steal here taking Jared Verse at 26.
Definitely. One of the top edge rushers in the draft this year falls to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, he'll immediately plug and play as their number one edge rusher. And he was a combine freak and putting up massive numbers at the combine and his pro day. And if not for different team needs, I think that he goes earlier in this draft, but for the Buccaneers, luckily he falls to them where he will be a stalwart on that Buccaneers defense. And moving on to the 27th overall pick is the Arizona Cardinals, who get this pick from the Texans from their trade last year's draft. So this is technically the Texans pick, but it's for the Arizona Cardinals, who just took Marvin Harrison, the top wide receiver in this draft, and this time they get the top defensive lineman in this draft in my eyes, and that's Byron Murphy out of Texas, not Iowa.
I noticed that last night. I did a practice one. He's not from Iowa.
He's from Texas, and he is Byron Murphy the second. Is he Byron Murphy?
Ooh,
of the corner?
uh,
Is he
what?
related? Isn't there a Byron Murphy?
Yeah, but no, I don't think so.
No, they're not
No.
related. Just coincidence.
Yeah.
But
There's no way no.
There's no way, right?
Not for him to be a second.
Not for him to be
No,
the second. Unless they named them both Byron
no.
Murphy, but I guess.
I don't think that's how it works, but it's your name. Do what you want
But
with it.
either way, I digress. This is the top defensive lineman, interior defensive lineman in this draft. He was the stalwart for the defense of the Texas Longhorns, teamed up with Devondre Sweat, who is their big run stuffer. And this guy is not only an interior run stuffer, but a pass rusher as well. And he can be a top tier pass rusher in the NFL, similar to Aaron Donald was in the NFL. And I think that he will be a defensive cornerstone for this Arizona Cardinals defense for years to come.
Yeah, crazy that you got two guys like Johnny Newton and Byron Murphy still on the board here at 27, but it's just how it falls here, and it just kind of depends on what you want more, because Byron Murphy and Johnny Newton are both very similar players, so it'll be interesting to see who goes where. If you think it's been a while before we had a trade, here you go, because we are trading again. The Kansas City Chiefs just recently let L'Jarius Sneed go, and he was signed up by the Tennessee Titans, so they have a huge hole right now at corner. And all three, the Lions, the Ravens, and the Niners, have a chance to take a corner ahead of the Chiefs. So you get with the Buffalo Bills and you start giving some stuff up. You see what you can do to move up and get a trade, get ahead of those guys, and get your first pick at a corner. There's the Bills. What will it take to move up 4 spots late in the first? Probably not a ton. Maybe a third, maybe a second. I don't know. It's not moving up much, and it's pretty damn late. They say you need a little more.
I think you need 3 picks there. I think you need.
That would make sense. I mean, it would be interesting, because I think the Bills would realize that the Chiefs are a little desperate to move up right here if this is the case scenario. I don't know, let's do like that. That might even be a little much, but there we go. We'll see. But it gave it to us, so we'll see how it goes. There's not a ton of really good corners left on the board, in my opinion, but you need to get somebody. So you go get TJ Tampa out of Iowa State just because he's kind of the top guy. I believe Iowa State's more of a zone team, if I'm not mistaken, but they do run some man, and they are really good in the run protect game. When you're in the, I was going to say in the Big 10, but I guess they're Big 12, so that's not really quite as true. But still, nonetheless, TJ Tampa isn't the best at it, but he can come up and play in the run game, which is something L'Jarius Sneed was also very good at. So you want to kind of get a good replacement for that. So they give up a little bit. I don't think they give up quite as much as it made me do here, but they jump up and they grab TJ Tampa in front of a couple of other corner needy teams.
Yeah, I definitely see the Chiefs going corner or wide receiver in this draft. I don't know if they trade up to get it, but I would have went Enos Rakestraw. I think he's the best corner available.
Interesting. Okay.
But I think that TJ Tampa is more of a second to third round pick. But we'll see. We'll see where teams have him.
Chiefs love to take those reach on those second to third guys in the first. So
Definitely. And moving on to the 29th overall pick, I got the Detroit Lions, who have a big need at edge here, and they got one of the best edge rushers available still, and that's Chop Robinson out of Penn State, who was their leading defensive player for Penn State last year for the Nittany Lions, and he was one of the best defensive players in the Big Ten. Not only leading Penn State in sacks, but I think he led the Big Ten in sacks. I might be wrong on that. But he definitely was one of the higher counts of it. But he is one of the more athletic freaks of this draft, and I think that he'll fit in that mean Detroit Lions defense very well and be a cornerstone for that defensive edge rush for the Detroit Lions.
I really like that pick. Like you said, Chop Robinson's just an absolute athletic freak. I think he fits that Dan Campbell mold definitely. I move on here to the Ravens, and you're going to see 2 edge rushers go back to back right here. And we're going to be taking a guy that I personally like more than Chop Robinson in this draft, not because of any athletic ability or pass rushing ability, but solely because of versatility. and that is going to be Darius Robinson out of Missouri. If you go look up where this guy played in the offseason, or during the season last year, he played almost evenly spread everywhere from a tight or an A gap one technique to a true off tackle edge rusher. He can do it everywhere. He has skill sets that makes it so he can do it everywhere. The speed and the strength that makes it so he can play everywhere on the defensive line. And if you get some pass rush and versatility like that in a blitz heavy defense like the Ravens, man, are they going to be happy with that. Maybe it's a little bit of a reach. Maybe you can grab this guy in the second. But why not just go get him for that much versatility?
Yeah, he's definitely probably the most versatile of the defensive players in this draft, especially coming off the edge there. And he'll fit right into that Baltimore Ravens defense very well. He will probably be a day one starter, at least a rotational piece right away, and especially for that Baltimore Ravens defense, who just are able to kick out all pros at edge continuously, no matter who it is, whether it's Zadarius Smith or Tyus Bowser. They just seem to draft and develop them and then let them walk in free agency. So I think this will be another one for the Ravens, and we'll see where he ends up in 4 to 5 years.
Does seem to be their game plan.
And moving on to the 31st overall pick is the San Francisco 49ers. And I have them as a bit of a surprise here because I have a little bit of inside information that they are going to lose Brandon Ayuk either during the season at the trade deadline or after this season because they can't come to a contract agreement. So I got them taking a wide receiver of the future and Keon Coleman, the big-bodied wide receiver out of Florida State. And he reminds me of Travis Benjamin, the
Panthers, right?
Yep, the old Panther wide receiver. And I was gonna say Chief. He was a Chief, but he started with the Panthers. He had
his heyday with Cam Newton.
Yep, I think he almost got a Super Bowl ring with Cam Newton.
Correct.
But I digress. He is similar to Travis Benjamin, and I think that he will do very well in the San Francisco offense, where he doesn't have to come in and play right away. He can draft. They can draft and develop him, and he can learn behind Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel, and eventually become the number one wide receiver for the San Francisco 49ers as a big body type, similar to Terrell Owens, but they haven't had that type since Terrell Owens.
I like it. I don't know what your insider information is. I didn't realize you were such good friends with Kyle Shanahan. But I'm happy you picked him actually because I wasn't going to pick him at 32, but I love Keon Coleman. I think he's very underrated. People just look at him as one-dimensional because he's just kind of that jump ball guy. That's so important to have a jump ball guy anymore. Mm-hmm. And in the gauntlet drill, which is the wide receiver drill they run at the gauntlet where you run straight down the line and go back and forth catching balls while you're running straight down the line, he actually had the fastest time this year, and that is such an underrated thing because the person last year to have the fastest time was none other than Puka Nacua, the 5th round all-star that came bursting off the scene for the LA Rams from week 1. So that is an underrated stat and underrated power to hold, for lack of a better term. I don't think Keon Coleman does go first round just because there's so many other good wide receivers, but somebody's going to get an absolute monster in the second round and possibly late in the first round here. Now, I was going to go receiver for the Bills no matter what here, even before Keon Coleman got picked, and it wasn't going to be Keon Coleman, but I'm actually going to go with not Adonai Mitchell, who's the better overall wide receiver from Texas, but the Texas wide receiver, Xavier Worthy. You see it happen every year. You saw it happen with Henry Ruggs and the Raiders. You saw it happen with John Ross way back when he originally broke the record after Chris Johnson did way back when. It happens every year that someone who has a really good 40 time or a really good overall combine shoots up the draft boards. And in this case scenario for us, it's Xavier Worthy. They lose Gabe Davis, who was their deep threat. He was a little more of a big body deep threat. Now they're just getting a speedster deep threat. You know Josh Allen has a cannon for an arm. Get somebody who he can just when they're 20 yards down the field let loose, and they're so damn fast that they're going to get under the ball no matter what. His big knock was concentration drops, which are certainly a thing, but those can be fixed. And when you just have that much speed, just like I said earlier, you can't coach size. You can't coach pure speed like that either. So maybe it's a reach, but the Bills here snag a new deep threat.
It's definitely a reach. I agree, because I think that he's going to get hurt a lot in the NFL.
I agree. Probably will.
He's a lanky guy. He's just not very big, not very well built. That's why he's so fast, because he doesn't have much to him. So hopefully they get some pads on him and he's able to protect himself, because if he does, he will be another superstar for this Bills offense. Because of that elite speed and that cannon arm of Josh Allen, he'll be able to get all the way downfield, and they'll be able to complete the first 100-yard touchdown pass from end zone to end zone.
That, if they do it, anybody will. It's fascinating to me that Adonai Mitchell falls out of the first round, but like I said earlier, all the way pretty much to the end of the third round, you're going to be getting near first round talent at receiver in this draft just because it's so deep. So I think you'll see at least one, if not a couple guys fall out of there. Only 4 quarterbacks, no 5th or 6th, which is kind of rare. A lot of mock drafts I've seen have a 5th or 6th quarterback, Bo Nix or Michael Penix. But overall, I had so much fun doing this. You could probably tell. I love doing it this style, going back and forth, because you have to react instead of just make it in your head. But this is our draft here. This is our final 32. So in about 2 or 3 weeks, we're going to do this again, but we're going to flip numbers. Callan's going to take all the even picks, and I'm going to be taking all the odd picks. And then about 2 or 3 weeks after that, we're each going to do our own mock draft and kind of our final predictions, probably the week right before the draft itself happens, just to kind of give, like I said, our final predictions. So thank you all so much for watching this episode. I know it's a long one, but I hope you enjoyed it and had as much fun as we did. Hopefully, if you did like it, like I said, in about another 2-3 weeks, we'll be doing another one. So you'll get to see it again with, I'm sure, a lot of other different picks and even crazier picks. Probably some trades will happen before then. So thank you all so much for watching this long one. And until next time when we do this again, don't forget
to eat the W.